everybody, welcome to one more round. I'm super excited. I've got Nick Arapkiles with us today. He's got the Just Grow podcast. He's got the Just Grow visions, but an entrepreneur. So we're going to chop it up, have some fun. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like it, leave a comment for us. And man, Nick, thanks for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, man. You nailed the last name. That's not very common.
Right. Well, I had a little help beforehand. I wanted to make sure phonetically I said it right.
Yeah.
So what background is that?
Greek.
Greek. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you like Greek food then?
Oh, it's the best.
Awesome. So my favorite little spot is Opalife in our complex here.
Okay.
I eat there like 4 times a week.
Really?
Oh yeah. I walk in, I'm like Norma Cheers. People are like, hey Josh, so.
What's your favorite?
So I like their kebabs. Their beef and their lamb are really good. Their chicken and shrimp are pretty good too. But then they got this Greek salad that nobody should be able to eat, but you put Euro meat on top. Cool. It's awesome. And then they do a cauliflower pizza with like feta and Kalamata olives and stuff. That's really good, right in my diet.
I might have to go check that place out here after I leave.
Absolutely. Well, cool, man. So you got the Just Grow podcast that's blowing up, which is amazing. And you do something that I haven't seen, but maybe a couple times. You do a live podcast. So how did Just Grow come about?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, man. And again, just wanted to say thank you for having me here.
Yeah,
I've been on your side a lot, and I'm just starting to get into being interviewed, and I always really enjoy it. So
that side's way easier, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, it's an interesting story. It's actually a really long story, and I'm working on how do I condense it the best way. But it really started. I was in Utah. I went out there for a week by myself, just a solo trip to kind of find myself. I was going through some particular challenges, and the last day I was out there, I was on top of Angel's Landing Mountain in Zion National Park, and I had this conversation with a guy who's an optometrist from South Africa, and we were just having this really cool conversation, and he said, you ask really good questions. And I'd kind of been pondering on a podcast. I basically did an interview right before I left, but I hadn't created it. But I just had a really good conversation, and it made me feel good because I was going through some challenges. And I kind of just thought on it, and I heard him say that, and I was like, I don't know, being out in nature and just in that, it was a really special place out in Zion. And when he said that, I was like, I think something's talking to me here. Someone's talking to me, God's talking to me and saying you should do this. And so I decided I wanted to do it, but I have a background in paid advertising and marketing in general. And I realized how fragmented people's attention are. So I was like, how do I actually get people to pay attention to this? How do I make it different? How do I make a stronger impact? Because if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I'm not going to just launch a podcast like the 2.5 other million podcasts out there. So I have a good network, and I was like, it was my birthday coming up, so I was like, well, maybe I'd throw a party, and that was the ideas. And I just hit up my friend Braxton. I was like, what do you think about us sitting down, having a conversation, and we have people listen to us, and then we just network afterwards, or just have a little shindig afterwards. And he's like, that sounds dope. So we sent out made a little flyer, sent it out, and I didn't know if anybody was going to come. I thought people were going to be like, what the heck is a podcast party? But sure enough, 60, 70 people showed up, and they really liked it. It was honestly one of the best nights of my life because I've always wanted to speak, and I kind of found this backwards way of doing it. And so it's just kind of transpired from there. We did a second one. It almost doubled in size. The next one, we had about 220 people at the third one.
Wow.
And that one really just kind of made me realize that this wasn't just a little thing anymore. It's turned into an actual thing. So yeah, then we decided, okay, now it's time to actually put it in a theater or a venue, and we found this theater that seems to work pretty well, because before we were just doing it in my apartment building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The capacity was 140, and we had over 200 people. So,
fire codes are for the birds.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's kind of the gist of it.
And you got another one coming up, right? September 8th, is it?
September 9th.
September 9th.
Yeah.
And where's that at? How can people get tickets for it?
Yeah, so if you go to justgrowpodcast.com, we got all the information on there. It's with a friend of mine. His name is Michael Law, really smart entrepreneur, young kid, but really sharp. He has this uncanny ability to just connect with some of the most influential people, millionaires, billionaires. He's never paid for coaching or consulting. He just somehow works his magic, and he's building a community and he's about to throw a big event. So he's just really inspiring, and for me, it's always about interviewing people that I really want to interview. It's interesting, and I'm sure you can probably resonate with this, is like as you start continue to grow, like you start getting attention from different crowds, and I'm big on staying genuine and authentic and like remember why I started, because like the reason that I started was to help me. Like really, it's just I love having conversations like these, and it's always about the person, right? People ask me a lot, like, oh, how's it going? How's the downloads like and whatnot? And I always tell people I'm building this podcast one person at a time. It's the person I'm interviewing. And I think that really keeps me grounded. And so even when I get like people reaching out, and if they're just like, they might have like a lot of followers and connections and whatnot, but like I'm more about, I want to collaborate with people that I like really resonate with. And Michael is definitely that kind of guy.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually heard somebody say that if you don't want to go to therapy, just start a podcast. And it's so true. Like there's been so many times sitting on this side of the table, talking to people, asking questions. I'm like, okay, that's for me, that's for me, that's for me. Hopefully somebody else gets benefit out of that, but it's pretty cool what you can learn about yourself through the questions.
Right.
So going back to that day at Zion, right? So you're up there and you're, with nature, and, you feel like you need to go into this. Is this something that you had done before, as far as like going out to nature to kind of clear your mind? Is that one of the things you do?
I started to. It was probably like the year prior I started doing, like we went camping. I was kind of a city slicker growing up.
Me too.
And I just had some friends like, hey, we're going camping. We went up to Flagstaff, and it was just a really good time just to like, I think for me, I have this weird dichotomy with technology. Is like, I love it. It's a great tool. Obviously, we're using it right now. People are going to be watching this on social. But it's like, I hate it at the same time. Because it's like, I get a ton of messages, and that's something I'm continuing to work through. Like, how do I manage DMs? How do I manage messages? But I just love unplugging.
Yeah.
Like, I love putting my phone away. I used to love putting on airplane mode. Now I don't do that as much now that they have different features. But yeah, I think it's really important to get out in nature. I think nature's therapeutic. I really do. And you just get out there, it's calm. There's no lies. It's all truth in nature. And it allows you to slow down. And I would just say in general, over the last few years, I've really dove much more into my spiritual practice and slowing down. And I think nature just really allows you to do that. So yeah, I went through this emotional intelligence program, and it really kind of shook me up, and I needed just kind of some space to get away, to have to myself. And yeah, I went out there and just really went introspective for most of the week. And like that conversation I had with that guy was really like one of the first conversations I had all week. But yeah, just like doing a lot of breath work, a lot of meditation, a lot of journaling. But yeah, I've continued on since that was like a little over a year ago now. I go on solo trips here and there. I just got a couple months ago, I went to Tulum by myself for about 11 days, and just hung out by the water. I wasn't like I'm not a big partier. I used to party quite a bit, but I think ever since I've kind of dove into this whole world of spirituality and understanding and finding myself a little bit more, I kind of keep to myself a little bit more. And I really do like to slow down the mind and slow down those brain waves, because I don't know if you know any of this stuff, but it's like most of us are living in beta brain waves, where we're just like stressed, and there's just so much distractions and all that stuff. So that's what meditation and breath work does for me, is like allows me to slow down and literally get my brain waves to slow down so that I can have these more receptive ideas. And that's where this has really come from. That's where the podcast come from, because I didn't like have a model where I was like, oh, that person did that looks cool. I was like, I think that sounds cool. I've got a lot of cool friends. I like having conversations. Why don't we marry the two?
That's how I started mine. Same thing. I'm like, God, I'm very blessed. I got a great network of people, and a lot of them would do well by being on a platform that they could tell their story, because they don't get to do it as often, because they're not like seeking that out. But I'm like, I know their story pretty intimately, and get them on. And then it came from friends, and then to people that you don't know, and it's a lot of fun, doing that. So you were talking about the spiritual side and like slowing down. I mean, it's important to get away whether it's up to the mountains or just by yourself, and to be without a phone for a little bit, because there's so much that's grabbing our attention on a daily basis that if you don't stop, like you don't give your brain the opportunity to get in the creative mode, you're losing part of life. That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, and even what we're talking about, I think before we popped on camera, is like I've noticed something with me is sometimes I get in these patterns of being very fragmented, where it's like I have a call and then I do work and then I have a call and do work and then I have this project and then I have a meeting. It's like you can't get into that deep work and get into that flow state. And so that's something that's just been very important to me, is like making sure we take those time and just like structure your day so you can get into that deep flow, because that's really where I think the gold is. That's where like great ideas come from. I talk about this a lot, but I read this book called The Master Key System. I don't know if you've read it.
But That's Key to Riches, but not that one, I don't think.
One of the things I got out of that, they talk about how one idea can be worth millions of dollars, but the only way that you're going to be receptive and allow those type of ideas to come in is if you're open and receptive to it.
Right.
And that's what I'm just starting to realize. Even right now, I'm rereading Think and Grow Rich, and it talks, like, I didn't even realize it like the first few times I read it, but it talks about how it's so important to meditate in that book. I'm like, wow, like it is really important to have a spiritual practice.
It's such a great book too. I mean, it stood up to the test of time. I mean, the only difference is at the time it was released, it was about the time that we were in a depression. So it was kind of right going into that depression time. So some of the stories were put in like a different context. However, the principles have held up. And yeah, meditation's one that Napoleon Hill was very big on, because he found that as a commonality of all the people that he interviewed. He was the original OG podcaster. He just put it in a book.
Exactly, man. I've thought of that. Like, he was the podcast guy.
Yeah, I love the story in there where he's meeting with Andrew Carnegie, because Andrew Carnegie is the one that commissioned him to do it. And he said, hey, I want to collaborate basically with all of these other business owners. I'll get you access, but it's going to take 10 years of your life to put all this material together and to do books. Will you do it? And he had his hands behind his back. And little did Napoleon Hill know that if he would have got to 10, he would have, taken the offer back. And of course, Napoleon Hill said yes, and the lives of a lot of people were changed from that point on.
Yeah.
So are you still, you sound like you're an avid reader. Any other books that you really like or resonate with?
Oh, there's so many good ones.
Yeah.
I would say one that really opened up my perspective was Joe Dispenza.
Oh yeah.
Because he put science behind all this spirituality. Like before, I thought it was like really woo-woo stuff. I was like, what is this stuff? But then he's kind of like backing everything up by science, and it's kind of hard to disregard it now that it's like, it makes sense.
Right.
And I was like, that really opened up my perspective. And like, because it's interesting too, because a lot of these people are all saying the same thing in just a different way. But Dispenza talks about how like it's so important to like feel those feelings. I'm big on visualization, and that's honestly what the vision videos are all about. But it's about the feeling. Right? And so that's what Dispenza talks about, is like you got to get to that place where you actually feel like you're living in that future. And so that made so much sense, because I've had stories where, like when I played baseball, I was big into visualization, and it worked really well, because anytime I closed my eyes and I could see myself hitting a home run, like I felt that, I got chills. And then there'd be other things what I'd do in my life where I'd visualize, but it just like, it wasn't happening. And I'm like, why is this? And then when I came into Dispenza's work, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So like, how do I make sure I continue to get to the feeling? Yeah,
put yourself in that moment. And so let's talk about that, because this is when you and I had our first talk last week. I thought your idea and your business that you have, where you create basically dream boards, you turn these into videos. And I know I'm totally simplifying that, but how did you come up with that? And like, tell everybody what that's all about.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking, because it's near and dear to my heart for sure, and I really think that it already has impacted a lot of people, but I think it has the potential to really grow into something spectacular and honestly revolutionize the personal development industry. It's obviously my company, so I think that, but I really think it does have some legs, and people have told me they think it's going to be a $100 million company. So basically the concept is like we take like the concept of a vision board and we turn it into like a movie essentially, so you can watch it and just like experience your future. But the thing that we did, and it's interesting because I guess I didn't even realize what I was creating at the time, because how it started was after one of my first events, a friend sent me a video, and it was this guy walking out on the stage in front of probably 3,000 people. And then it was a podcast. So I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. Since I started throwing events, I was like, I want to be in front of that many people.
Yeah.
So I watched it and it gives me chills. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. So I started watching it every day. And then I even went a step further and I downloaded the video and I put my branding on it. So I made it a little bit more real. And then I was having a conversation with a friend. We were up at a cabin, again, kind of disconnecting. And he just said something. He's like, well, that's probably not the only thing that you want. And for whatever reason, that just, it's always these pivotal little things that people say in these conversations where I'm like,
yeah, you're right.
There's something there. And I was like, yeah, vision board videos. And it was interesting because we were up there for a weekend, and that was on a Friday night. We were coming back on Sunday. I literally wanted to immediately get back home to go to work. I was like, I want to put this together. And so I did. It took me 20 hours to put this thing together, and I started watching it, and it gave me chills, and it would even bring me to tears at times, because I would be sitting there. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I'll tell you all the components here in a second, but it was crazy because not only did it feel really good, all of a sudden, a couple of the main components that I put in that video is that I wanted to make more money and I wanted to find a relationship. And both of those came in like that.
Wow.
My income 3x'd this job that I was working. Out of nowhere, our client decided to give us the whole account. We were spending about $1 million a month at that point with client ClickFunnels. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
Oh yeah, I've used them a lot.
And then this girl showed up. It was crazy. So I'm like, wow, does this really work? Or was it kind of luck, or was it a combination? I don't know. So then I was like, all right, well, I think there's something here. So I started kind of putting it together, started set up for the event, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to pitch it at this event. And so another interesting part of this story is, I would say it's kind of chilling, having a good time, just making more money, hanging out with this girl. And then all of a sudden, I think the CEO of the company I was working with, he kind of saw the trajectory of where I was going, not putting my heart into what we're doing as much. So he canned me a week before the event. And I'm freaking out because I just started investing all this money into this event. This podcast hasn't made money at this point. And we're, finally get a venue, all this stuff. And then I'm like, I'm going to pitch this idea. That's all I got right now. My expenses have never been higher. Living situation, everything. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to do this podcast, and then I guess I'm going to show them this video. And it kind of has to work. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so part of me was like, I think this is a really great idea, but part of me thinks I'm just a crazy person. I don't know. So anyways, I showed the video at the event. There's about 120 people there. And I was like, so here's the idea. I want to make these for you guys. Who would want one? And the whole room raised their hand. Yeah.
When you told me, I'm like, this is a home run. And for a few reasons. One of the reasons, and I want you to get to the components in a second, but it allows you to, number one, put yourself in that place and to feel the emotion. But then it allows your reticular activating system to go to work for you in your brain, to where, and Ed Milet talks about it a lot, but if you don't know what the reticular activating system is, if I say, hey, I want you to pay attention to blue Dodge Ram trucks today, and you're like, oh, I haven't seen one of those in a while, you're going to see a bunch of them, because now your brain has been positioned to only, to look for that. So you're doing that with vision of where somebody wants to go. So their mind is automatically going in that creative mode to get there.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. So what are the components and stuff you put in the video?
Yeah. So one thing that I realized through my interviews, I don't know if you recognize this if you ask people this, but I would encourage you to maybe just think on this a little bit more throughout your conversations. Is asking people if they acknowledge themselves much. And I do that quite a bit, and I'm just kind of conscious of that, and I inject that into kind of my conversation. And I'm like, do you recognize how amazing you are? Because as of you, I've interviewed some pretty impressive people, and I asked them, that's amazing, that's incredible. do you realize how incredible you are? And they're always kind of like, no, not really.
Yeah, it's usually on to the next thing or the next 10 things, and they're very rarely do they take the time to respect what they've accomplished and who they are.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Like, that's something I've acknowledged, and I recognize it in myself too. I don't acknowledge myself as much as I want to, and really build myself up. Because here's the thing that and again, all this, I realized all this stuff after I made the videos. So I feel like that's kind of an interesting piece of that. But basically, because of that fact that people don't build themselves up enough, we added like a component into that. Because basically through a lot of the research that I've done is that if you actually start thinking about the stuff that you want and you're not in a good place, you don't have good energy, and you're like thinking about because then once you start thinking about, like, let's just say for example, you want a Lamborghini and you're in just a rough spot and you're not feeling good. And then you start thinking about a Lamborghini and how you want a Lamborghini. What you're actually doing is you're thinking about the lack of it, that you don't have it. And then that puts you in a more negative state, negative vibration, and then you're less likely to even attract that more. So what we do is we build people up first. We walk them through their challenges. And the challenges, because we walk them through and remind them of like, hey, you went through this challenge and you overcame it and you learned all this and you became a better person because of it. So we're basically helping them associate that challenges are actually a good thing for them. And we walk through another challenge, and then we walk them through another, like a current challenge that they're going through. Then we walk them through their successes and their wins that they've had in their life, kind of like a highlight reel, just to be like, hey, remember you did that? And you did that? How dope was that? That was incredible. Look, you did that. And now they're in a really good state because they're like, oh, damn, like I am pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we also, do you know Andrew Huberman or know of him?
I don't.
He's a neuroscientist at Stanford. He's got a really big podcast called Huberman Labs. And one of my friends had sent me one of his episodes talking about gratitude and what is the most effective way based on neuroscience for gratitude, and it's hearing gratitude from other people. And so when I heard that, I injected that into the videos too, where we get voice notes or videos from friends, family, people they look up to and admire. And we put that in the video, like they say why they're grateful for them, why they believe in them. So we do all of that component right there. And then we go into like the vision stuff of like, hey, I want to build this 8-figure business. I want to travel to Bora Bora. I want to, have a family. I want to, find the relationship, whatever it is. So, and then we talk about it as if it's all in the past, like it's past tense. And basically the whole narrative of it is it's them. They record the audio. And it's them talking as if it's their future / highest self coming back to them and giving them a pep talk.
That's super cool. So basically, if I'm understanding right, you're casting yourself, let's just say 10 years into the future. And you are filming this as it is 10 years in the future. And now you're looking at the highlight reel of even things that haven't happened yet, in addition to the ones that have. Is that right? Yeah.
And because that's the interesting thing. I've gotten that piece of feedback at the first event. There was one person in particular, like, I can't tell what's already happened and what's in the future. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the point, to make it so real and vivid that everything feels real, so that you get that feeling like you're already there.
Right.
Because again, like, through personal development, a lot of people think like, oh, I want this and I'm reaching for this. But the key to all of this is knowing that it's already here. It's already all within you. It's just about pulling it out.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. So you have a website that people can go on and start the process?
Yes. Just Grow Visions is our website. We just put that together a few months back, right before our 5th event. And yeah, we're figuring out the process. It's again, just like the podcast isn't something I'm modeling. There's been a few like other companies that have like softwares that are somewhat kind of like this, but not really. Point being is that I'm not working from any model. I don't have anyone saying like, this is how we did it. I don't have any mentors like that. It's just like, hey, I'm figuring this out. But yeah, it's been a complex process, and we've probably gone through, I don't know how many, like 10 iterations by this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, you basically can go to that site, and then you can book a call with us, and we can kind of walk you through it and talk to you and see if it would be a good fit for you. And then basically also we're putting together 2 different versions as well, because one is, the full build, that's what we started with. And it's a great process. It's a very involved process. So there's definitely some time and definitely a time commitment to it. So now we're putting together another style where there's less of a time commitment to it, so that we can just crank them out a little bit easier. So yeah, those are kind of the two options we have right now. But again, we're still just continuing to figure things out.
Right. Like every entrepreneurial venture, it seems like there's always the unknowns that you got to figure out. But you're definitely an out of the box thinker, I can tell. And it is only the second conversation I've had with you. Were you always like that as a kid?
I would say no. I went through a pretty, I would say, traumatic experience a few years ago, and this is kind of like, this all ties into the story of why I dove into my spiritual side and had, I would say, a spiritual awakening. I tore my pectoral tendon it'll be like 3 years in October. It is. Yeah, I got a nice little scar there.
Oh yeah, if you guys are listening and can't see this, go to YouTube now, and that's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually really proud of it now. But it was crazy. I've had challenges with relationships, and breakups have really got to me. And I was going through one of my first real breakups, and business wasn't going well. Like, nothing was really going well, and I finally just kind of like acknowledged all that. And I was lifting in the gym one day, like literally finishing up my set. Like, I was doing really good in the gym. I was putting on some size, getting strong, and then I'm benching. I put on a little extra weight. I went to flat bench, which I didn't normally do, but I'm literally finishing in my last rep, last set. I'm going to rack it, and it just falls right back on my chest. And I knew something was incredibly wrong. I never felt or experienced anything like that before. And no one was spotting me. Like, it could have been really, really bad. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. Someone finally helped me up. And then I was visiting my parents in Colorado, and I went over to my mom. I was like, we need to go. I don't know what just happened, but we need to get out of here. And this was right after I'd kind of just finally shared with her about how, like, I'm just not in a good space right now, and just like really broke down and cried in front of her, which I don't normally do. Before that point. Now I recognize that I am very emotional. But then, like, immediately after that, we're driving to the ER. I don't have health insurance either. That's like a whole other component of this, but I just lose it again. And I just broke down. She's like, why are you crying? Because she knows that, like, I'm pretty adverse to pain, like physical pain. It doesn't really affect me that much, but she's like, she was confused. And I said, when it rains, it pours. And it just showed me, like, what kind of energy I was in there. And I don't know, I think for me, again, everything kind of comes back to a spiritual conversation for me, because I think God is like, he gives you these nudges and saying, like, go in this direction, and if you don't pay attention, all of a sudden the nudges turn into shoves and pushes and stomps.
Yeah.
So I felt like, he was speaking to me through that, and that was honestly an amazing experience, because I ended up having surgery, and then just really had some time to sit back. And I stayed with my parents for a few months. I had a nice little sling. I was sleeping on a recliner for about 6 weeks, and just gave me time to disconnect completely. I was off my phone. I wasn't getting on Instagram. I literally just, like, I felt like I was in rehab, where I was just like meditating every day. I was reading, just working on myself, working on Nick, and making sure that he got to a good place. And after I got back, I was definitely a different person. And you ask any of my friends that knew me from before, they're like, he's a bit different.
Changed. Well, and it's interesting, because I notice a common theme, like when you disconnect, with phone and technology, and you're kind of in that space, it seems like that's where you go to the next level. Which I think everybody should take that into account. Like, getting away and giving themselves that space can help you get to that next level.
Yeah, and it's, I have a friend, his name's Ryan McBurney, and he introduced breathwork to me. He's a breathwork practitioner. He's one of the best. Like
a Wim Hof type breathwork? Or?
Yeah, similar. He kind of has his own style, but he's the one that introduced it to me, and that was kind of all in line with the same time of all of that. And when I got back to Scottsdale, then I started really diving into breathwork and going to his events, and that I mean, I stay pretty consistent, and it's actually interesting. We kind of put a component of that into the videos as well to like kind of prime your brain or just prime your state before we even dive into any of the video.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so important. I think breath work, I think meditation, I think mindfulness, all of this stuff is becoming a lot more wide known. It didn't used to be. It used to like, okay, crazy woo-woo spiritual meditators. But now they're like Dispenza and so many other people are backing it up by science and making it realize like you actually need this stuff if you want to like be good and like calm down and not have so much anxiety and all that kind of stuff. So obviously in my opinion, I think it's essential. And even if I go a few days without doing some type of breath work, meditation, mindfulness, I start getting real antsy and I start feeling it. So I think, and just through the conversations I've had, a lot of people say the same thing. And that's why I think it's really cool that we're all starting to kind of wake up and be more conscious now, which it wasn't that case.
So with breath work, if somebody's looking to get into it, what would you recommend? What's a good start for them?
I mean, for me, anytime I'm trying to learn something new, I just go to YouTube, University of YouTube. That's how I've learned anything really. And then just kind of start down that path. I know there's a lot of guided stuff on YouTube, and then obviously there's different practitioners. I think going to like being in that energy of people is really powerful. So I started going to group events, and then I actually started doing some one-on-ones with my friend Ryan, and it was crazy how much more impactful that was. And it really is insane because you can have these like crazy releases where you're just, whether that's laughing, whether that's crying, but you're like flushing out all these emotions, and it's like your body starts vibrating. It feels like you're vibrating. It's wild. And like sometimes they call it tetany. I don't know if you ever heard of this.
I haven't.
But like basically you'll see it at some of these events where people like they're like clawing up, where their like hands all get like this. It's really funny and interesting. But I would say like start with YouTube. But if you know of anybody, or just you can kind of search it out, find some local stuff that you can go and get around that space and that energy. Because like if you're in a room with that type of energy and other people, it's infectious. Like everything's energy, right? So if you're in a room of that, then it just like compounds.
Yeah, I know for me, I learned it from a guy named Michael who owns Optimize here locally.
Yeah.
And Michael would take me in the room. They got this cool machine. I forget what the machine is, but it throws like this electric light. It looks like a freaking thunderstorm happening in this room.
Oh, wow.
But he taught me the Wim Hof that day, and I still do it pretty frequently. And I got lightheaded the first time I did it. I'm like, holy smokes, this is the real deal. He taught me. So if somebody's local, they can check out Optimize. They have one on, I think, Arcadia, and then the one that I went to down here in Tempe.
Oh, they got a new one.
Yeah. Well, they've had the one in Tempe not too long, maybe a little over a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I've gone to the one in Arcadia. It's an amazing spot for the. I've actually been thinking about getting back on my membership because it's powerful just to have that time to disconnect.
Absolutely, and I love the cold baths. I never thought that would be me, but for a couple of reasons, it really helped. So I had some heart issues last year, even before I had heart failure, but that was a virus, kind of a separate thing. But AFib, one of the things that took me out of AFib was cold plunges.
Really?
So it would slow the heart down, and then it gets it back on pattern. And it only happened a couple times after I had the big incident, but I was able to hop into the cold bath, and boom, would take me right out, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. It's a neat place. Do you do any of that kind of stuff, the cold plunges, or?
I haven't been doing it as consistently, and that's hence why I've been feeling a pull to get back into it. But I love it. I used to go to a place, I don't think they're in business anymore. It was called Balance. It's the same concept of Optimize, but it was just right here in Old Town, right next to where I lived. But yeah, same concept, cold plunge, and do the alternating, go in the hot tub, go in the cold tub, hot tub, cold tub.
Is it harder for you to do the cold or the heat?
For whatever reason, I don't have that much of a challenge with cold. I mean, obviously the heat probably feels a little bit better, but I have friends that they're like, oh, I hate the cold, and I'm just like, I don't know, I kind of like it.
I hated the infrared sauna. I mean, to get to 20 minutes, the infrared sauna, because you know how it is. You're sitting there, and it's weird the first time you're in, because little beads of sweat perfectly start to cover every surface. It's like oh, wow, they're coming out of every single port. It looks really, really weird. But yeah, you're in there. When you get to like 15 minutes to 20 minutes, for me, that was the worst. So I'm like staring at the cold bath, and the Tempe one, like I'm staring at, please, Lord, let me get through this 5 minutes so I can get in that cold plunge. So that was the hardest part for me.
Interesting. I've never heard that before.
But I would just notice things like I would sleep better. My mind was great. Plus, you're in there and you don't have your phone or anything, so it's that time to disconnect. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, get rid of those damn phones.
Right. I know you hit it on the head, man. It is it's like a catch-22. You have to do it for business. I mean, if show me anybody who's not using a phone to promote their business that's super successful, and I'll follow them. I will be their Napoleon Hill and I'll write their book.
Yeah.
But I don't think it really exists. So.
Well, from my perspective, it's like really developing a system and getting the proper delegation in place, and that's kind of what I'm working on. Is obviously you can't completely outsource everything, and it's interesting too because like that's what's helped me build up my network and everything I've done up to this point. And so that's where I even have like this dichotomy where it's like I've continued to build these relationships, get on calls, text, all this type of stuff, but I see some of my really successful friends and even look up to some of my mentors that they don't talk to a lot of people. They keep their mind very quiet. They keep their environment really quiet. And so I'm always reminded of the quote, what got you to where you are isn't going to be the same thing that's going to get you to the next level. And so I feel like I'm just starting to enter this space where I am a little bit more to myself and not as available. And I think it's whenever I am doing that, it's obviously like up till this point, whenever I do disconnect and kind of get away from that stuff, that's when the great ideas come in, and that ultimately helps me serve more people. So, it is a dichotomy, but it's something I'm still continuing to work through. But I think delegation is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, the calming space is where the creativity can come. When you're constantly busy and doing things and your brain's going 10 different directions, it's very, very hard to let any creativity and good things come. So I think that's the common theme here, is we all need to get away a little bit more and be a little more to ourselves and quiet down.
Yeah.
I got 3 kids at home, so it's a little harder for me to have, and my wife, but the 3 kids are always running around doing their thing, and it's just awesome. But
that's great.
Yeah, man. So your podcast, you've got a bunch of episodes out, and I've seen some of the people you've interviewed. I think everybody should go and subscribe to Just Grow podcast. Listen to some of the episodes over there. What's on the horizon for it? What do you want to do with it?
I mean, long-term vision. I have this vision that I have like 3 really close friends that are all doing some like pretty impressive things, and we're kind of all on our come up together. And I have this vision of us doing a panel podcast, the 4 of us, in a stadium in front of like 100,000 people. Like actually, we were talking about it. I think it was a couple weeks ago, doing it at the Diamondback Stadium.
Be dope.
And they announced us. We come out of the dugout. I used to play baseball, so that would be really special. So like that's like a long-term vision. Right now, like the main focus is the vision videos, continue to elevate them, continue to add more quality, continue to innovate them, and ultimately just get it out to as many people as possible, because I just dream of a world where everyone has a vision video and everyone's waking up, they watch it, and they're inspired and they're motivated and they're happy and they're fulfilled. They have great relationships, they're making money, they're doing things that are impactful. And it's just like, you look at the science behind it and everything we've already talked about, it's proven. I even had a client that made me a 40-minute video explaining why vision videos are so beneficial on a scientific level. And I'm like, wow. That's incredible. Like, it's resold me on them. Yeah. So that's the main focus, and we're starting to build some strategic partnerships with people that potentially could like really push it. And I mean, we could get like 300 clients in a day. And like that's kind of the mission right now, is starting to collaborate with those type of people that really see the vision. Coming back to what we talked about before, is like, I'm sure like eventually we'll get connected with some of the biggest names out there, but I always want to make sure that it's like people aren't just because they see a money opportunity. I want to make sure that they see the vision, they know what we're doing here and why we're doing it. but I just think it really has the potential to change the world. So I have a little sense of urgency with this because I've already, this is an interesting part of all this. I feel that I'm having all these great innovative ideas, and so I'm kind of the pioneer at this, and I think other people are catching on. Mm-hmm. And so I want to move quick, because even I'd never heard of podcast events, and then all of a sudden I'm starting to see those pop up.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, people are, and the more I'm growing, the more traction we're getting. Obviously, more people are paying attention to what I'm doing. So I'm like, all right, well, let me make sure and cross all my T's, dot my I's, and let's get to it and like start making these partnerships, start building my team more, start elevating, like become a leader. Yeah. That's really what it is like, how do I lead my team better? How do I build my team quicker? And just let's get this out and help as many people as we can.
That's awesome. No, man, you're doing huge things, and I can't wait to see how it grows. I'm really excited to be at the live event because I have not attended a live event yet. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, guys, make sure September 9th, you go check out that live event. As I already mentioned, go ahead and subscribe to his podcast. Great material there. Like and subscribe to this, obviously. But Nick, you're doing great things, man. I appreciate you on the show. We'll see you all next time.